Hi students, this is Professor Laney and we're here today with Chapter 6, Specific Learning Disabilities. Now, as you can see, Unit 1 looks blank because I figured out that all that stuff that we talked about in Unit 1 was just slowing down the Prezi. So it is still accessible in every single chapter. So when you go under chapter information on Blackboard, you can still get Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But I just erase that just so we can kind of smooth things out and it'll go a little bit quicker here in Prezi. I also found out there's a desktop application. So if that helps you, if it's just faster that way, go for it. I'm also trying to, again, find ways to speed it up and not lose content, but it doesn't, I don't have to have like 7 videos on each little bubble. So let's hop into Chapter 6, Specific Learning Disabilities, or you might hear me just say Learning Disabilities or LD. This is a rather large category. The presentation I think I got nicely compacted into about 150 slides, I think. But this particular chapter is very common to a lot of people. So again, in Unit 1, we talk about the historical foundations and culture and learning a new language and disabilities in general, our beliefs and bias. And then we talked about, speech issues when kids are little and they're still learning how to talk, or even disfluencies that stick through a lifetime. Now we're talking about learning disabilities. Now, remember, even though we talked in Chapter 5 how it's like a large category. Well, it is a rather large category, but remember, some people with speech impairments have that as a secondary. So maybe somebody has an intellectual disability, and we'll talk about later, but they also have speech. So if you add everybody with a secondary categorization of speech disorder, speech delay, or speech challenge, that is a rather large category. Learning disabilities is the number one largest categories on its own. So we'll get into the statistics and prevalence and things. So again, it's almost a foundation chapter, and we'll learn very quickly that dyslexia in itself, even in its mild forms, affect almost 20% of the population. So if there's 10 of you guys 10 of you and your friends hanging out at a house party, there's 2 of you, right? Interesting. So let's get to it. So again, like I said, this is the largest group of disabilities here, and I really like how the book talked about different ones and the specific issues, and is very consistent about the levels of impairment and the 3 main issues with learning disabilities. But I want you to take a second and think about why it's so challenging to work with, and why is it something that's not going away. I mean, some of the numbers are lessening, but it's not going away. Again, neurodiversity says that we're all different, and some people have different little hiccups in their brain, or different wiring, or different structure. But because this is an unseen issue, it's very difficult to deal with. A lot of kids are just quiet or introverted, and they're really hiding a struggle. So you'll find that at the schools, remember, we categorize here, but you can't go get a blue placard for your car because you have dyslexia. So there's a level of disabled but not disabled enough in this category. So it can be very, very frustrating. Now again, dyslexia or learning disabilities can be debilitating, but that doesn't mean that somebody can't be successful. We have a lot of examples on that. So it's a very controversial topic, and it's not going away. It affects a lot of people, and I will share with you a little bit of my learning disability and when I found that out. I'll give you a hint. It was in college. So I'm a big fan of the DSPS program. So again, a lot of techniques, and we'll do a little bit of review on some of the techniques that we've learned in previous chapters, but a lot of different things can help students like this. And so we got to really figure out who those students are and what makes them tick and what makes them learn in a very effective way. Sometimes you just have to get very, very creative within the structure and the frameworks that we have. So I wanted to remind everybody that the specific learning disabilities here, look at that. That's almost half. I mean, that's a big deal. That's almost half. And again, we talked about speech or language. Some of these students over in here, let's say, remember, we'll talk about OHI. This is where ADD shows up. Some kids with ADD have a speech and language. So sometimes they're categorized, right? under one or the other, and we'll talk about miscategorization on purpose. It sounds weird, but sometimes it helps. And so again, life isn't black and white. Life is a bunch of gray areas, and sometimes you'll have a student who starts here when they're younger and then they kind of switch over to here, right? Right? And then there might be some of this in there as well. But you'll have a lot of typical learners just with some issues here. And it might be you. And that's okay. This one's kind of hard to see, but I wanted to create it really quickly to see the structure here. Students with learning disabilities are not dumb. There is little to no cognitive impairment, meaning their IQ is intact. It might be between 90 and 110, right? So that's right in the middle, the bell curve that we talked about. But sometimes they have above average intelligence. So it's just the way the brain processes new information. Okay, so again, information that comes in and may or may not process well. Okay, and again, you might see somebody with one specific learning disability or a little bit in all the areas. Okay, they have a lot of gifts. It's lifelong, and sometimes you just have little crutches to help yourself out. It can be very mild. It can be also very severe, but you'll see this kind of situation here. Some people have it in writing or reading or math or organization of social skills, or maybe all of those things. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting how, again, it could affect a lot of people in different ways, but it can be very, very a big problem, and sometimes it can be a very small problem. Okay. Now, again, we always start with a definition here of learning disabilities, and I want to make sure I'm keeping up on the book here. Again, this is learning. This is how we learn. So sometimes they have everything else going on. They could be super popular at school. They can have a great family. They could be a jock. They could be student council. But how they learn is a little bit different. Okay, and it does have impacts more than just the classroom. Okay, so there's a definition, obviously, that IDEA, the federal government, has agreed on, and it has a lot to do, and I'll show you in a sec, has a lot to do with kids just not being able to keep up. So again, there's not intellectual problems, it's just a difference. And so I like to use the word difference instead of disability. Some people are disabled by it, and some people are like, okay, well, I just got to work harder. So again, we'll talk about that later. You're going to need a different level of instruction. That's why in the foundation chapters we talked about RTI. We will review that here. And then the multi-tiered instruction and CBM, which we kind of went over last chapter, and we'll do it a little bit more here. So again, think about it. If you are working on your car or you're working in the garden, do you just take like a spoon or like a butter knife from the kitchen and just go, yo, I'm going to go work on the car with that? No, you have to use the right tools, especially if the job is very specific and requires a lot of finesse. So here's the definition from IDEA. It's a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language, spoken or written, that may manifest itself in an imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. So, and then this NGCLD, this is the National Joint Committee on Learning Disabilities. They kind of came up with their own definition. I don't want to confuse it, but I just want to let you know that the definition has kind of changed a lot because as we learn more things, we learn more things. So let's start off with this. Professor. A lawyer. Celebrity. Aww. A very, very successful person. Heart surgeon. Sometimes it takes the woman in your life to let you know. Yeah. Oh. So what they're saying is that if you're going to a regular school and there's nothing wrong with you, maybe you're pretty successful, but that is a lot different. Your skill is a lot different. You may have a learning disability. And again, it could be mild or pretty large. Mhm. 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 That's correct. That's correct. So I look at it as information gathering. Some people, do you know some people in your life who are readers? Oh, somebody who's like, you can always catch them with a book. I think that's fascinating. I used to leisure read. I don't leisure read for fun. I don't have a lot of time. But I do put in audio books in the car, and I will listen to them over and over, and I process information that way. I am a visual learner, but at the same time, I have to, if I'm driving, I have to pay attention to driving. But again, it's how you think of the information. You either getting it out of a book, you're hearing it, you're seeing it. For me, I like to gather information from experiences in the world, not so much from a book or maybe a quick read on, Google News or I don't know, something quick. I'm more of that kind of person. You could see me as I'm keeping busy as we're kind of watching this. I'm a multitasker. So, and that's okay. But am I processing both pieces of information? Maybe, right? So again, everybody can be different, but is it an impairment? Look at that. Oh, that makes me sad. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Mhm. Gives me the chills. It's amazing. It's amazing. Get the chilly willies. So awesome. Yeah. Yep. Mhm. It's hard. Yeah, just being a busy teacher. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're getting into an advertisement for this one particular school. So again, a school can be good, a school can be bad, a teacher can be great, a teacher can be bad. But again, I don't want to say that this is an advertisement for them, but listen to what these people are saying about the techniques that are used, not so much about the school, because I can't attest to if it's a great school or not. And I don't even think it's around here. Oh, I think that's so sweet. Oh, so great. Or just be better at the school that we're at. Yeah? How about the teachers get the supports that they need? And how about we keep doing professional development? Okay. So again, not an advertisement for a specific school, but they're saying more time is needed with a student, or an early identification is needed with the student and the family. And I think that's super, super important. So um, again, learning disabilities is that unexpected underachievement, and you will see that come up again and again, meaning everything's okay. Everything's okay at home. Everything's okay with that child physically and cognitively and emotionally, and they're still behind, right? So learning disabilities, there's different ones, and there's the unexpected underachievement. They used to use the IQ as a measure. Well, if your IQ is 85, then you must have a learning disability. No, you can have kids with an IQ of 130 with a learning disability, which is almost low genius. Resistant to treatment, meaning we can work and work and work, and sometimes things just don't stick. I have a family friend who's 15-year-old, just, I mean, hours and hours and hours of homework, and it's really challenging. Now, we did talk about multi-tiered instructional frameworks. We got to put them through the steps to see, if a child can be helped at the first two steps, we don't have to go to the third step, right? So there's a system in place, and so we can get those going. So as a review, that RTI is we need to start with the screening. We need to have a multi-level system and a progress. So we need to know if this is working, because if it's not working, you don't keep doing it, right? So again, we talked about culturally responsive teaching, evidence-based practices, and then you get this improved student outcome. So it's a little bit of a review. And then the curriculum-based measurement. Again, it's that progress monitoring we talked about in the last chapter. We'll talk more about it today too. The types of learning disabilities. Now, the book is very specific. They have two. They just put everything in two categories, and that's it, which I think is fine. But we may use other language as we go forward, and I want to review person first language here. It's not the dyslexic kid. It's not the dummy. It's not the that bad reader, right? Um, so we say the child with, the student has, right? People first, okay? So again, the most common is reading, the reading disability, and sometimes that also translates into writing. And then that's kind of hard because sometimes you have to read in order to learn, and then everybody else is moving forward, and then you got to read more to learn more. So that gap shows up, and it's hard to catch up. So it can be extremely frustrating. Now, again, some students have one area of challenge, and some students have challenges across the board. And this chapter also talks about heterogeneity, and we'll get there in a sec, okay? that just means that this category of student is completely, each student is so different. If you took all the students at Santa Ana College and put them on the soccer field that have a learning disability, they would all have a different, some sort of different quirk in different places, and have different techniques that help them, right? So again, hetero means different, just like heterosexual people, like a man and a woman, different. Homo would be the same, right? If we said this group has homogeneity, that means they're very, very similar. This group has heterogeneity, which, sorry, this is sign for different. I don't realize sometimes I'm talking with my hands. I'm actually talking with my hands. So interventions have to be very specific to that person. Okay, so a reading or learning disability is where the impairment's in reading, and a math learning disability is when the impairment's in math. Okay, so two broad categories, but you'll hear things like this: dyslexia, dyscalculia, right here, reading comprehension, aphasia, dysgraphia, and so here's the dyscalculia. It's kind of hard to see, but if any of this you think it might be you, that's great, or somebody in your family, fantastic. There's help out there, and there's a lot of information. So please do your own research. Okay. Now, again, the dual discrepancy is that the rate of learning is slow and their performance is behind. So it's really like a catch-22, double-edged sword. It's really, really hard to get. So this right here, I want to show you. So this shows right here, this student's kind of all over the place, right? Maybe he had a good day, maybe he had a bad day, and the trend is moving up a little bit. You kind of see a little bit moving up here. But what they decide to do is do an instructional change, which it could have been a second level support, it could have been a different placement, it could have been a different school, it could have been a different teacher, instructional change. Then you see maybe a little bit low here, maybe this is the adjustment period of like, oh, I don't like this teacher, I don't like the school, or I don't like being pulled out of class. But then you see this, look at this, it's starting to really progress in this upward trend. And so if you just take one line from the bottom to the top, you're going to see this, which is great. But this is the expectations. They start where the student starts at, right? This is the expected line. And look at this. He literally moved past the expected line in 90 days into a region where his typical peers would be. And it's okay to have a little backslide, but look at this. This is where this strong line right here is where all, let's say he's a second grader. This is where all the second graders should be. And look at this. In 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, he's back on track. So again, the right supports, the right teachers, the right parents, it can work. I'm really excited to show you guys that these things are workable. And again, heterogeneity means there's a lot of difference within a group. Again, if we took, sometimes I'll have classes and everybody in my class has brown hair, or it's all women. So I would say that's a very homogeneous group, brown-haired women, right? But if you took all the students or all the people in Orange County, you would have a heterogeneous group, different peoples, different heights, different incomes, right? So again, hetero means different. Then the characteristics, things that they have in common. Again, there's 3 defining characteristics, and I need you guys to remember that because that will show up on a quiz and a test. Okay. And again, it can look a little bit different with everybody, but there's 3 main characteristics. Unexpected underachievement, like we said. Resistance to instruction doesn't mean that they're being mean or they're having a big behavior. They just don't get it, right? And poor social skills. So not only do they not get it, but they might blow up, and and so the social skills, and then it affects maybe their peer relationships and such. So again, because it's not seen, it's hard to figure out. So let's keep that in mind, even again with yourself or somebody in your family or a child in your classroom again. Now remember, when we talk of learning disabilities, you won't see this in the preschool environment as much, right? There may be a little bit of indicators, but we'll talk about some little pre-red flags on that. But again, there's additional issues here, and we're going to start to see this when kids start to learn. Not being able to generalize a skill. Generalize means that a skill that you've learned in one place or with one teacher, you can't apply it to somewhere else. Like, so for example, you'll have a lot of students who are learning how to maybe tie their shoes in preschool or kindergarten, and some kids are a little bit later, right? But they can do it at school, but they can't do it at home. That is a non-generalized skill. So if a student can stop and tie their shoes anywhere, then that is a generalized skill. So same, it could be anything from doing math or even saying please or thank you. If that skill only happens to one in one situation, in one area, in one teacher, then that's a non-generalized skill. So these students are, it's hard because they might learn something in the classroom, but they don't remember it the next day or they don't take it home and do the same thing. Okay. Visual or auditory processing challenges, yes, big difference. You'll hear people who hear the word, you'll see them, and then they're calculating and they're thinking about it and they can't really get it. And then some of the basis of this may be language development. So again, and the neural pathways that come with that language development. So this is what I call the gap. Okay, so again, this is what this is what we can, the predicted performance, and this is what they could do. You know, this is like the lower expectation, and there's a gap here. Okay, so that again is kind of what you're going to see with learning disabilities. And remember, not every disability is visible. I like this, was kind of cute. Dyslexia, don't mark off for spelling, right? We have the luxury of spell check now with our word processing. Your support, scribe, that means somebody, if you dictate to somebody, somebody else can write it better. That is an accommodation, and we'll talk about that as well. Lighter workload, sometimes that helps. Extra time, very helpful. Explicit instructions, and we'll talk about that as well. Be very specific. Inspiration, just know that they can do it, right? And you can do it. And try audiobooks. And you'll see why. I explained to you why I like audiobooks. Now, direct explicit instruction is really breaking down instructions into smaller pieces and being very specific. Instead of saying, go write an essay, right? Saying these are the instructions. This is your worksheet. This is your topic. Fill out these 3 boxes. Make sure that you cite your, so getting it very specific, okay? Now, keystone academic skills, and we'll talk about that in a sec. It's reading, writing, and math. Keystone, meaning keystones are a reference to the stone that holds up a building, right? It's either a foundation piece or it's a piece right above a doorway that just locks everything together, okay? Now, challenges, right? We talk about that, but we need to also talk about the solution. So a lot of challenges, but there are a lot of solutions. So we'll talk about what could work here. Sometimes when kids get behind, they get more behind. And so we have to really look at how to keep that momentum going if they like moving forward or if they don't like moving forward or if they have excuses or they just stop trying. Yeah, that shows up a lot in this part of the chapter. Okay. So motivation is that front side. So like, for example, I tell people, oh, like I want to lose some weight. Okay, but why? Okay, great. Great question. Do I want to do it because my kid, I want to live longer, or I want to do it because I want to look hot in a Halloween costume or something, right? So my motivation could be for me, like I really want to do it because I really want to do it, or I could be motivated because somebody else outside of me or some others, oh, I'm going on a cruise and I want to look good in a bathing, right? So there's external motivation and internal motivation. So to figure out what works for a student, you really just have to figure out who they are. And well, I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in subsequent chapters, but if you're interested in really talking about motivation and attributions, I talk about that a lot in 207, which is empowering parents, because I also believe in empowering the teachers and empowering the parents to empower the children. Okay. Attributions are like after the fact, okay? Like when you say, I'm going to lose, like, let's say New Year's resolutions, right? I'm going to lose 100 pounds this year. And then the end of the year rolls up and everyone's like, oh, yeah, well, I had a stressful job and, I didn't have any money. And so it's explanations that people try to justify why they didn't meet their goal. But some of the more positive mindset ones are, I haven't achieved that yet. Okay. And we'll talk about mindset as well. Learned helplessness is like, well, I've been on 1,000 diets. Why should I even try? I've gone to school so many times. It's so hard for me to concentrate. I've dropped out of so many classes. Why should I even try to get my degree? So it helps. I mean, I'm not saying it helps. I'm saying all these little failures add up to one big failure. People kind of it it's kind of like a domino effect. So hopefully we can get to these students before they have this learned helplessness, because these are people who are like, oh, I don't, why should I work? I can just get welfare, right? So it can, again, be very extreme or pretty mild. Okay. The rest of the definitions in that chapter were kind of review. So you can go ahead and look at that in your chapter. People and situations. Again, people first language here is super important. But there are voices of people who have been there, who have done it, and we saw that in the previous video, but I have another one here. You'll see a lot of this part of the chapter talks about film, who like how we can see it in movies like Percy Jackson. I thought it was kind of a cute little um, explanation for dyslexia. His brain was just a little bit different, wired differently, but he was really good at reading other languages. So I thought that was great that there's a like a silver lining there. And again, there's a lot of people who succeed. That's a good example. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's 20% people. 20%. Mm-hmm. Every single one of ours. Mm-hmm. That's true. It's creativity and personality. Right. Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? Isn't that great? I love it. So that's like TED Ed. So you know how I like TED Talks. That's TED Ed. Um, Ironically, it was one of their speakers who is a very famous autistic doctor. She said, you guys should have TED just for the schools and create some sort of educate. She said it off the cuff. You guys should do it like that. And they did because it's important for these mini lessons for you guys and me. So see how things just change when we pay attention? And kids with disabilities are just kids. Remember, people first language. It's just a kid. It's just a kid, right? But that kid who might need help. They're not their label. They just might need help. Now, origins of learning disabilities. Origins, again, always been around. We've always had this as part of the human condition. But not until the 1920s was it started to be studied, and then there's been a lot of changes, we kind of mentioned with the definitions, but in the 60s is when the school services just started. So, yeah, and I'll talk to you guys about research and how things come about through research. So this is a graphic, a super long graphic from understood.org, and I'm going to talk about this understood.org. It actually shows up in our chapter through one of our web links, but I'm going to tell you on a very personal level, understood.org, I'm a big fan. And this is why. I mean, I always collect a lot of information on ADD and processing issues, not only because my brain's a little different, but my son is, some of you may in subsequent classes be able to meet him. If you take 207 or 220 or 107 or 110 with me, um, he has ADD severe, as I may have mentioned. So I'm really curious about how his brain processes information, and it seems to process a lot of information at the same time, and some of it's correct and some of it's incorrect, and some of it sticks for a long time, and some of it doesn't stick at all. So I have to, as a parent, remind myself to be very honest and open about getting to know him and his brain, because I don't think that he knows a lot about his brain. He's learning, but he's a different person than me. So I figure like I just need to remain curious about how things work and how hopefully he can kind of stay inside the guise of rules. So understood.org, big fan. And I tell you, it was one of the first things that my husband, who is not resistant to information, but being a teacher, like he doesn't, he was one of those guys who didn't really like school, so it's kind of hard for us to communicate. You'll see that a lot in families where the mom's like gong-ho and the dad's like, what? Everything should be fine, whatever. He looks fine. It happens even in a professor's house. So understood.org was the first thing that my husband said, you know what? It described him perfectly and it makes perfect sense. So it has like a place in my heart because it actually was not the information that I gave him, but the information that he was ready to understand in a very cool way. So he subscribed to that, gets the email. It's great. It's again, I've been very blessed with that. So learning and attention issues sometimes go hand in hand, but again, learning disabilities can be separate. So again, we'll go back here. And a long time ago, there was a term called word blindness. So people just couldn't see it. Excuse me. And then the word dyslexia came up. In the Americas, it didn't show up until about the 20s, which is a long time after. Fidgety Philip. Oh my gosh. In my old 110 book, I think it shows it in there. It's hilarious. You're just being like, oh, let's make a poem about a kid who can't sit still. And then in the 60s and 70s, you start to see here seem like, oh, let's look at medication. The term learning disability showed up. Oh, look at this. Oh, ADHD. Oh, the DSM. Oh, in the 60s, the DSM called it hyperkinetic impulse disorder, which I love it. I love history of this stuff. Things develop as we get more information. And again, IDEA gets passed, Center for Disabilities. And again, in the 80s, we renamed hyperkinetic impulse disorder to ADD. The ADA was passed. There's more changes here with the IDEA. ADHD is now served under other health impairment. And again, there's I like how this term dyscalculia comes out. Math dyslexia. She calls it dyscalculia, and so that was kind of a new term that came out there, and I think it's great. And then more changes here with No Child Left Behind Act and things like that. So really excited that there's a lot more efforts involved. And again, we really look at civil rights and look at understood.org launches. So again, I'm going to suggest for you guys just to check that out. And if there's anybody who you'd like to share that with, big deal, big fan. So again, when things are first found out, they kind of start down here and then everybody's got it, right? You remember when everybody became lactose intolerant or everybody had ADD or everybody, right? It just boom, and then it kind of stables out. And then look at it, it starts to kind of taper down. And it has a lot to do with interventions. Oh, well, they're not dumb and they're not intellectually incapacitated. And oh, maybe it's a speech delay, so let's recategorize them. Or maybe it's a cultural issue, right? So you'll see how things kind of like balance out. And for the most part, learning disabilities have started to go down. That trend is still going down, which is great. It means that we'll talk about recategorization. Okay. Let's see. All right. Now, prevalence. How common is it? Some of the videos talked about that already. And again, some of the recategorization or just shifting will happen. Now, this is kind of like my 2 cents. Okay. So this is what the book says here, right? Looking at learning disabilities, again, you can't see it from the outside, and some students don't even know what they don't even know. So why would they raise their hand and be like, I have a learning disability? So again, it has to do with a teacher and a parent and really connecting and just people asking for help and offering help. But this is my 2 cents right here. How do disabilities get figured out? Now, we've seen in some of the chapters so far that they'll say, oh, these have been around for a long time. So when things are around for a long time, people start to get curious and people start to collect information about that issue. Okay. It could be anything from the extinction of a particular animal to people's cell phone use. It just people get curious and they start to collect data. Okay. So then these teachers or doctors or researchers, they notice similarities. And so maybe somebody over here in Germany is doing research and somebody over here in New Jersey is doing research. And then they do their research and they make sure that it's good. It's not just like my boyfriend's cousin's sisters saw Ferris Bueller and he told me that people use their cell phones like 17 hours a day. No, they do good, honest, valid, and reliable research that can be replicated so they can collect more information. They publish the findings. Sometimes it's in a book or a journal. Sometimes they go to a conference. And then there's this trend of like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. This is a new thing that this guy figured out. Then somebody names it, right? You know, sometimes it's not really real until there's a name. They share it with the peers or they have another conference and they do more research. So it kind of gets this momentum. And then when it's named, they can get it into legitimate, like, journals, articles, books, other doctors will start, you know, it's that kind of situation. So just know that this process is my opinion of how things kind of, right? And then when it's new, it's huge. Everybody has ADD and everybody is lactose intolerant. Everybody's gluten intolerant, right? You'll see that when things are newer, right? This is what I wanted to show you. This is what 20% of a population looks like. Actually, no, I think that's 10%. So what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So 12 times 24 is about 300, right? So this is looking like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's less than, yeah, so if this is 300 right here, this is a 0.5%, right? So this says students with disabilities enrollment. So you're going to get more like 20% is going to be more like this whole section right here, right? So half would be right about here, right? 25% would be about half of these guys here. So maybe these bottom 3 rows plus this half of this 4th row. That's 20% of people with learning disabilities. At any school, at any function, in any college, in any movie theater, 20% of the population. Again, it could be mild, could be severe. So just remember, if it's you or there's somebody in your family, it's pretty common, right? So let's start with taking the stigma away. 1 in 5, that's 20%. But a 1 in 100 teachers might really understand. A lot of teachers know what it is, but to understand, I would agree with that 1 in 100. It's pretty funky, huh? And again, back here, I just wanted to show you that people kind of, they know what it is, but they don't know what it is all the way. And it seems almost too good, too real because it's too big. It's funky. Okay. Now remember, when something's new, the numbers go up fast. Like, people do more research, and so for this type of students, they will do RTI and see what part works with RTI. In CBM, they're going to do curriculum-based measurement and see what works there and keep doing that. And again, new categories are created in special needs, like in the disabled community at schools. That's why OHI was created, for this huge boom of ADHD kids, right? There's no category for ADHD, and there might be later, but right now it's under OHI, other health impairments, okay? Now, students may be incorrectly categorized on purpose. So for example, again, my son is ADHD. He's categorized as ADHD is number 1, autism number 2, and emotionally disturbed as number 3. So because he even has an ED on there, which I'm not a big fan of, he gets an intensive level of therapeutic support, which is nice. I'm not sure if it's super fabulous working well, but it's nice. It allows him a place that he can work on his feelings and his pragmatics and social skills. So if that wasn't there, he wouldn't get that. ADHD and autism, they don't get therapy, because usually with kids with autism, there's some supports there, but they don't get that level of intense therapy. So again, recategorization is part of the deal. Now, again, I said that some of these things have changed over the years. Look at this. Specific learning disabilities have gone down. Speech or language impairments, pretty consistent across the board. All others, now look at this. Who's jetting up from the bottom here? Autism. Autism is kind of getting higher here than ADHD. Look. And other health impairment, ADHD. So what years is it going to be to where it's going to be more ADHD and autism than speech and language? Maybe this will come down. Maybe this will come down. Maybe, again, look at that. The learning disabilities have gone down. Isn't that crazy? It's a good thing. Okay, so in regards to special education, remember, we're learning about these and how they are in the schools, right? Not how they are at home, but how we can support them in their learning environments. Learning disabilities show up pretty early. But they don't look like learning disabilities because those kids, maybe they're sitting with a book, but they're not calculating something, and they're not really writing anything more than just their name or trace the shape, right? But if we can see some hesitation or some resistance there, it's a good indicator of what's to come, okay? And again, we have to really look at what are the foundational skills in preschool. Math and reading. Think about a preschool. The last time you were been around a preschool, you might be the mom, you might be a teacher. Last time you were around a 3 or 4-year-old, and if they can have a basket of blocks and they can say, well, I have 1, 2, 3 blocks, then they've counted, right? If you can put the number 3 on something and they can say, that's free, and even if it's said incorrectly, they're getting there, right? And we can work on all these things, right? If a child's only 3 or 4, they've only been on the planet for 3 or 4 years. So we can't expect it to be perfect, but when things are getting learned, they progress. If they don't, then we got to keep our eye on it. Adding single digits using objects. Objects. I have 2 crayons and Sarah has 3 crayons. How many crayons do we have together, right? And they can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Brilliant, okay? And then comparing single digit numbers. Now, if I have 2 crayons and Sarah has 3 crayons, who has more crayons? Well, Sarah has 3. She has 3. She has more. Perfect, right? So check, 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 right? Preschool done. DRDP. You'll learn about that if you're a child development major. Now, the core skills of reading is that phonological awareness. When we see an S, do we go, or do we see an S and say, what sound does it make? S, 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 right? If a child can do that, you're in a good shape. If they can't, Got to keep an eye on it, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but some of these skills, if they're not learned in preschool, right? And what if somebody's not even in preschool? Does it set them up for some struggles later? Sure does. Okay. Rapid naming of letters and sounds. They will actually do flashcards and see if a kid can get, they don't have to do all 26, but, if they can get 15 to 20, then you're good to go, right? So again, you might be able to see a struggle there between certain letters that look the same, and that is hard for people, the B's and D's, right? And I tell people P's and Q's. Oh, I still struggle with that, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. And beginning phonics. If you know that S is S, but ST is ST or ING, that's a little bit advanced for kids. But beginning phonics is like putting two words together. Car, or putting two sounds together. Cars. I have a car and you have two cars. That's manipulating that language, beginning phonics. And also knowing that, how to manipulate those sounds, okay, combinations of sounds. Phonics is the sounds. Phonological awareness is the process. So you can have the sounds, but knowing that is different. Knowing is different than just saying a sound, okay? Letter fluency is that rapid naming, okay? And again, this is really, I like this one here because we really want to look at cognitive skills, and for early intervention, if we have some kids who have a little bit of, if they don't remember stuff, well, they might be young, but if they don't remember anything, that's different. Sequencing, a lot of what happens first, like you'll see seeds. They'll plant a seed, and then there's a little sprout, and then there's this, and then there's a leaf, and then there's a flower, right? So you'll do sequencing, and then reading fluency. Even if they memorize brown bear, what do you see, right? And then reading comprehension, right? It's not just the very hungry caterpillar. It's like, well, tell me, why was the hungry caterpillar? Why was the caterpillar so hungry, right? And then metacognition, that's kind of an advanced phrase, but not too advanced, because my son's first grade teacher expected them to know what meta frameworks was, metacognition, metacommunication. That wasn't stuff I learned until graduate school, but even her students could say metacognition. We're thinking about our thinking. It's very cool. Check it out. I can't spend a lot of time on that, but check that out. That phrase, Google it. It's worth a Google. Now, again, these are, look at this, kindergarten, first, second, third down here. Making sense of stuff, listening and responding, then the concept of a word, right? This is not even preschool. Preschool would be over here. The concept of word, because like CAT means a cat, and so there's a symbolic representation. Initial consonants. Consonants are, anything that's not a vowel, and starting with the beginning. High frequency words, yes. It's going to be at, the, to, for, jump, hop, like stuff that you see in books at that level. Initial blends and digraphs, that's like the TH and the PH and the ST and the ING, right? So again, you're going to see all these different levels here. But again, I wanted you just to see what the foundational skills are. If you have kids who aren't even getting this, it's hard to progress, okay? So think about that as well. And I like to look at a gap. Again, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that there's a gap, and let's address it. Let's fill that gap. Okay. Again, current results versus where they need to be. And when I say need, I just mean age appropriate grade level work. Don't need to be a rock star. Okay. Now for the school years, most of the students participate in general education. In fact, where did I put that other one? I think I left, there's one graphic I left outside. I think it's this one right here. Where students are served. I should move that over. In fact, I'll do that. Students with disabilities are most served with, look at specialized academic instruction. So you're going to get students who are most likely going to get a high level of instruction. It doesn't mean that they have to leave the classroom and go to a different school. It just means that that's what they're going to get. Okay. Let's see if I can get this back on track here. Okay, good. Now again, validated practices help us learn that we're learning properly and in a sequential, usable, replicatable like a recipe, right? You wouldn't just do anything when you're doing a recipe. You kind of go back to the stuff that works, okay? Now, can learning disabilities be overcome through instruction? Some of it, yes, some of it, no. But think about that high level, high intensive, high quality instruction can lessen the impact. Meaning, if a learning disability is this big, maybe you can like shave it down to this. That is like, okay, I can tell you for me, when some of my little brain quirks show up, I haven't eaten right, I haven't slept right, I'm thirsty, I'm not hydrated, or I'm under a lot of stress. And so there's things that you learn about yourself, and there's things that you learn through your teachers. Okay, so remember, this is kind of a review here. Most students are going to get this universal level of supports here, high quality instruction. Then a few students are going to need a little bit more supports, and then some of the other students need a little bit more of this here as well. And again, this is really great because, again, this could be a kid who's looking word correct per minute. This was the end of first grade, I think, that they were measuring. They'd give him a little thing with a little reading passage and there'd be lines on the side. And he started off with about 60 words a minute and got well over 100 within 1 year. Part of it was a high quality instruction. Um, his supports, his one-on-one aid was not that great, but his teacher was fantastic. She expected the world from him, and he switched on to be a reader, switched on to be a learner, loved school, loved his friends, right? So it's really getting in there and showing you, again, getting those supports in there in place. So this child, so you see how the gap gets bigger and bigger? This child doesn't have to struggle so far to keep up. Okay. Now, again, we can talk about what comes next, because school is not everything. And it is, obviously, my teacher, but there's life, right? So we have to look at how to transition. But here's the deal. Remember with those numbers going down, or maybe this way, going down, that means that more students are getting more confident in going to college, which is yay, which is great. Okay, accommodations can be offered in the classroom and even in college. If you sometimes your IEP will go to 21 years old, and depending if you're in the foster system or you have some special dispensations, that IEP might go to the age of 26 in the state of California. So it shows right here, all young adults, only 60% of 70% go to college. But look at this enrollment. So it's less people with disabilities, and that's sad but true. Enrollment by disability. So people who have a hearing impairment or might be deaf, they're going to college. They're like 3 out of 4 are going to college, which is great. Visual impairment, we're going to put on their glasses, use your tool, and get around. Speech and language. So this tells you right now, Chapter 5, speech and language, learning disabilities. So look at these are about the same. Isn't that crazy? Speech and language or learning disabilities, this is like 6 out of 10 or maybe 7 out of 10 people, right? And again, intellectual disabilities, so people have problems with cognition, and we'll talk more about that too. But this is great that there's more people going to college and graduating college. This is an example of classroom accommodations. Now, we talked about I think it was chapter 2.3, we talked about the 504 plan and the IEPs. The 504 is really just a list of accommodations, and that's part of the process. But this is a great checklist for students, for teachers, and right. Maybe it has to do with voice, the teaching techniques. Maybe visual cues are helpful. They told Peyton's kindergarten teacher to give him thumbs up, like that would keep him in his seat. It's hilarious. But look at breaks, right? What about the materials? We would get little clay for him to get his little busy bodies out of his hand, but then he would throw it. So yeah, not a useful tool. Or we would put Velcro under the desk or a big rubber band under the chair so he could kick it. So it would kind of keep him focused. We also learned sour candies and gum help him stay focused and he doesn't talk as much. But the gum ends up in his hair or under the desk or whatever. So we have to be careful on that. But assignments, what are we doing here right? Do 3 and see me, meaning do 3 steps and come see me. And assistance, parent, counselor, and consult with other staff. This is great. So This shows that you've helped a student in the classroom, or you can show this to the parents and say, hey, like, I've tried all this stuff, it doesn't work, so let's go to the next level of supports. Let's see here. Next. All right, future perspectives. Not a big shocker here, okay? But we talked a little bit about curriculum-based monitoring. You have to do like those low stakes quizzes, and just to keep, how do I know that you guys are getting the concepts of this particular lesson, right? Especially you'll see that with math or like a new concept learned in language. Technology helps now too, because teachers can have that checklist on their iPad, and just they don't have to sit down with a piece of paper for every student, and they can just say boom boom, I've tried this, this and this, we tried this and that. So not everybody uses CBM or RTI, but the places that do see the results. And so we're trying to make it quicker or faster for the teachers to actually implement that, because it can take 10% of the day to actually get those extra pieces of work, tools filled out. And it's hard. I know when a teacher goes home for the day and they've got more work to do besides grading, trust me, it's not easy. So we don't want to overload our students. But, I mean, our teachers and students. But our transitions for college there's a lot of cool things out there. Understood.org will help. What is the other one? There was another cool one, and I put it in the back of the chapter, but I want to look at it now. It is, the NCLD. There's a transition checklist, and there's something else. I'll show you. I think I put it right here. Hold on. Again, it's just one piece of the puzzle. Let's fill the gap and move forward. Okay. Obviously, early intervention, I wish they would put early intervention earlier in the chapter. But again, if we can catch a lot of these issues in preschool, then this is the way to go, right? Again, this is for people who actually take their kids to preschool, right? But again, we need to really all work together to help students at the beginning, because the supports at the age of 3 are much easier to do and to put into place than they are at 13. Please, earlier the better. And I know it's hard. Again, if you're struggling as a parent to try to accept and move forward with your students' disabilities, please come take 207 with me. If you're a teacher and you're struggling with parents who are in denial about their students' disability, please come take 207 with me, and we will get through this. Trust me, it's a great class. And again, offering more supports at the beginning, much better than trying to catch up later. Yes, earlier the better. Okay, we all know what early intervention is, but again, here's another review of RTI, because I want you guys to get this. Okay, most kids are going to be here, right? They get one little awesome tool and they're good to go, right? Maybe it's more time, maybe it's they can hear me on it, something. One tool, they're good to go. And other students need a little bit more, and some need more there. Okay, and it's okay. We're going to do this. It's doable. Okay. So just remember, when it comes to our chapters, that first one was a doozy, right? So we described learning disabilities, we talked about the problem areas and the supports, what different types of supports that are there. And again, it may be lifelong, but some are reduced or prevented. So I really liked how Steven Spielberg talked about how he was diagnosed as an adult. I was diagnosed as an adult with dysgraphia. It's a very specific, I don't even call it a learning disability. I thought my brain just moved too fast. I mean, I do talk fast. But when I write, like if I'm writing an essay, like when you guys have to write an essay in class, I mean, even our exam has an essay, but you get to type it, right? When I write things, my initials are MMM. My married name is Lainey, but I can write my name and then forget a letter in my name. And I was doing that, and then I would just go back and correct it. I was just a good student, so I just went back and corrected it. Plus, I didn't want anybody to know that I was a little bit weird, like Whoopi Goldberg said. And when I write really fast, I try not to write, like, my scribbles are kind of like this, and it's I tell people I'm going to be a doctor someday, so it's future doctor scribble, but that's not right, right? And we saw in that first video that there's a lot of doctors with dyslexia. So for me, I had a teacher catch me when I was at Fullerton College. I was at Fullerton Junior College. That's how old I am. It's called Junior College. And she said, I noticed that when you're writing your essay, and it was an English class, she's like, she asked me, is English your first language? And I was like, yes. So she was trying to figure out if it was a language difference or a language disability or learning, right? She said, I noticed that you switch around some stuff. And I was like, well, she's like, are you dyslexic? And I said, I don't think so. You know, I'm a fantastic reader and I got straight A. Like, it was fine. But I know that my brain was, and I just assumed everybody's brain was like that. We had a little hiccup, so we had to go back and fix it. So I created a symbol because the B's and D's are difficult for me and P's and Q's, and so are G's. So I tend to um, I tend to mix those things up in my brain, which happens. It's very common. But I also switch numbers, and I don't even want to say 6 and 9. It's not even the ones that you would think. It's like fours and sixes switch in my head, and twos and fours. But again, I was a very conscientious student to where I went back. But in a high pressure situation, I would blow it. So I just figured if I just got a really solid A and I blew it on a test, it would, yeah, it's fine. I came up with a symbol to help myself. It's this. So if you're in my class, my typical class, a traditional class, and you see this on the board, this could mean P, D, G, Q, or O. Really. So I think she thought I was writing in Greek or something. So I went to the disabled students program and they gave me a little test and they said, yeah, you just have this little issue. Do you need more time on an exam? And I said, no. And then later I went back and said yes. And so just giving myself an extra 30 minutes on an essay, I actually was able to go back and correct certain things. And I felt I just like needed a little bit of extra time. So my learning disability is called dysgraphia. I can read things okay. I can comprehend things fine. But when it comes to getting that out into my hand, there's a disconnect. And so thankfully I had that intrinsic motivation to push myself, double check my work, do really good work. So technically I could hide it, right? So it happens. And I really like how adults come out and say, I'm like, yeah, I was like 20 and and they're like, how did you do in school? And I was like, well, I graduated like, I think 16th in my class. So I think I did pretty good. So again, everybody has something that they have to deal with, but you either need help with it or you need long-term help with it or you need minimal help with it. So please, I'm not using this story for any other purpose than to illustrate the fact that there are supports out there for you. You think you might need it, just sometimes it's hard to admit it. Just go do it. Just go get the assessment. What if they come out with the assessment and says, no, you're fine? Great. Or they offer you an accommodation, you just don't take it. And I could tell you, as a professor, I have students, I'll go back here as I'm talking. I have students who are identified with DSPS who don't need the extra time, and they aren't the last ones in my class. So just know that it doesn't mean that, you know, you have to use all those accommodations all the time. But if there's some that help, then please let us help you. Okay. And again, context, there's a historical piece there. And again, we have to help these kids catch up as much as we can because that gap can get too big too quick. And then there's prevention, there's technology, and there's techniques. Okay, so cool. So this week for the weekly journal assignment, I'm going to have you guys watch this TED Talk, and it is an adult man with ADHD. He also talks about how, with dyslexia, and he also talks about the gifts of dyslexia, and I really like that as well. And then I picked one activity because there was a lot of activities in the back of the chapter, but oh, it's not related services. That green bar is incorrect. It's called high quality math instruction. So I'll fix that one. This is incorrect right here. So it's this high quality math instruction, what teachers should know. And I like this module. I think it's doable, and I'll put that in the discussion board as well. So you're only going to answer one question in there. I think it's number 3 in the assessment part. So really easy. I'm sure you guys are getting the hang of this stuff. Again, we're week 7 in. Again, make sure you have that done by Friday. And then the websites that they talked about, which is kind of great, Intervention Central, RTI, and NCLD. This one's kind of cool. The Special Education About Sam Kirk. He's kind of like one of the founding fathers. And this guy right here who developed a program that helps people, like kind of like Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I think it's great. So again, check those out. I won't play them here, but I want you guys to check those out for. Now again, there's organizations and Learning Disabilities of America and professional journals. Again, if you're a teacher and educator already, you might want to look at those journals. So again, we have quiz due by Sunday, and that is your chapter. Chapter 6, Learning Disabilities. So again,